You do? Okay. Why don't you learn about protocols for testing for heavy metals in local drinking water? Your teacher knows how to do it. Every year, the students at Andover High test the drinking water in Andover for possible residues of lead, cadmium, benzene, arsenic, all of which have been found in drinking water supplies here and there around the country. You put out a report, you give it to the newspapers, you put it on the internet. You know what happens after a while? You connect with the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, which we got through Congress, so you know what your rights are to go to the purification works here and get regular reports on their tests. You know what's going to happen after 5 or 10 years? You're going to have probably the cleanest drinking water in Massachusetts because you're the watchdogs. You don't think that's a good way to learn chemistry? Think again. Do you have the capability to do it in your chemistry lab? Yes, indeed. Or you could easily get the capability. How many of you have biology labs here? You have a biology lab? Okay. Use the surrounding environment as your laboratory. I know botany students often are taken out in field experiments, but the ecosphere is dying for your lack of applied biology and ecology. And I want to elaborate. You can elaborate yourself. You know a lot about this. Connect the classroom with the community. Physics lab. Have a physics lab? Okay. You can learn about what's this missile defense all about? Why are we spending every year since Reagan $9 to $10 billion a year to develop missile defense? That's bigger now coming up, if the Republicans get their way, than EPA's budget. Imagine that. They have to enforce the Clean Water Act, pesticide laws, the air pollution laws, on and on. And why are we spending this? Raytheon wants to spend it. That's a big deal for Raytheon. Now, if you're part of a physics lab and you come across a statement from the American Society of Physicists, many of whom were consultants to the Pentagon, and some years ago, they put out a statement that missile defense program is unworkable. It can be too easily decoyed, and if anybody sends a missile over here, we know the address, don't we? We know the home address. So people aren't going to be that stupid. There are a lot of other ways, suitcase, nuclear, dirty bombs, and so on, if they want to be that barbarous. But these missiles can be decoyed with balloons. They also had other esoteric criticisms. They're pretty credible. And not many miles from here is MIT. MIT has a professor of engineering, his name is Ted Postel, who's challenged anybody, anywhere, who is pro-missile defense program to a debate, a technical debate they can't accept. He's got the goods on him. He's taken a lot of heat, but he persists. Now you got a physics lab, and you say, this is amazing. Why do these prominent physicists think it's unworkable? We're studying physics. Let's try to understand them. Let's try to critique them. See how easy it is? If you want to connect knowledge to action and reality, and I haven't even begun to discuss the humanities and the social sciences.
What do you feel about President Obama's decision to not release the photographs of Osama bin Laden's death?
First of all, it's very gruesome. they shot him in the head, and they took part of his body for DNA. The FBI subpoenaed the brain of his sister who died a few years ago in Boston. You want something gruesome? And according to an anti-intelligence operative, retired now from the CIA, he was on WTOP. When anybody ever makes assertions who come to visit you, always ask them, where's your evidence? And anybody in government says, we did this and do that, always ask them by what legal authority. And you'll be way ahead of 99% of all high school students. What's your evidence? By what authority? Press in Washington do not ask them. They're patsies. They want to have access tomorrow. They don't want to be blocked. So, on this point, he's on WTOP right after Osama was killed. His name was Koriako, I think. John Koriako. You can get WTOP Washington. And he said, you know, the question was, Osama was 6'6". How could he hide? I mean, like he towers. And it just as a matter of fact, this anti-terrorist guy formerly with the CIA said, in a very low-key voice, said, you're right. We knocked off a lot of guys who were tall, and we had to apologize very frequently. How do you like that? You know, just saw a tall guy in a caravan, knock him off. This is the United States of America. Has our government been hijacked by criminal gangs? Do you know when a war is a war crime? When you have a war of aggression under international law is by definition a war crime, because all wars should be defensive. When it's a war of aggression, every act in the conduct of that war, no matter how innocent the soldier may have an intent, is a war crime.
I mean, I'd like to say that in our society, people are free, they can do whatever they want, but I feel a lot of people have this idea that they have to conform to certain ideals in order to be truly accepted in their society for who they are. But eventually there comes a point, maybe around my age, 15, where you come to realize that you really can do whatever you want, and you can stand out in any way you can break the barriers, but sometimes it takes people a little bit longer to realize that these barriers aren't really there.
Now what we're really talking about is identity. We have all kinds of identities that we describe ourselves in all kinds of ways. Let's face it. But oftentimes the last identity we evoke is that of citizen. And that's what can be turned around with this kind of curriculum that I'm suggesting. There are a lot of taboos in every society, things that we don't want to discuss. And in the political arena, there are tons of taboos. They don't want to discuss the military budget and its swollen, corrupt contracting system. They don't want to discuss the horrendous boomeranging drug policies that we have in our country. The politicians don't want to discuss taxing Wall Street trading. Why should we have taxes on things we like first before things we dislike first? Why don't we have a tax system where we tax what we dislike the most before we tax what we like the most, like furniture, clothing, sales tax, or labor? If we tax the trillions and trillions of dollars of trading on Wall Street, so-called derivative trading, if we tax that 0.5%, what's the sales tax here, 8%? 7.5%? Okay, you go into a store and you pay what, 7% or so on necessities of life, correct? Right now, someone in Wall Street can buy $100 million of Exxon derivatives, 0 sales tax. So I talked about this all over the country. I could never get the Democrats or Republicans to raise it. It was a taboo. That's where they got their money from. Obama got more money from Wall Street than McCain did. If you had a 0.5% tax on Wall Street trading, you would bring in almost $400 billion. Billion. We had a stock transfer tax in the Civil War. FDR had a stock transfer tax, and then they got rid of it. Now just think of that. You see the taboo? It's almost never discussed. What other taboos can you talk about in the following weeks? Taboos are the enemy of thinking people. They're the enemy of protecting dissent. The mother of all assent in our history started with dissent, starting with Lexington and Concord, starting with the Constitutional Convention. Taboos are something you want to get rid of. It demeans us as human beings. And the taboo of why this auditorium was structured so it wasn't full with students who I think would have liked this kind of engagement is one you should lift as rapidly as possible so it never happens again to visitors to your high school. I want to thank, in particular, the Andover Education Association, who made this possible. The proceeds go to citizen and consumer protection, as they have been ever since I started. All of the PIRGs, like MassPIRG, how many people have heard of MassPIRG? We started that with college lecture fees. Started them all over the country. I want to thank the Andover Education Association and Matthew Bach and all the others who made this possible. The teachers in our country have far more to give than are allowed, and I don't like to pamper teachers either. The ones who cannot teach or will not teach should not be teaching. The ones who want to teach beyond the restrictions of a censorious society or an upset local chamber of commerce, if teachers want to teach students about consumer protection and apply it to the local banks or the local supermarkets, they should be free to do that, the teachers. We have a great potential in this country for an America in the next 50 or 100 years of dazzling prosperity for all, of health care for all, of such living wages that we can shrink the work week. Look at our enormous productivity and automation, which should accrue to workers, not just to investors. A country where we lead the world as a humanitarian superpower. We're quite able to be a military superpower. One thing we know how to do in this world is to purify water. But if we're building $9 billion aircraft carriers that have no defense function anymore with the demise of the Soviet Union, if we're building more nuclear weapons, more nuclear subs, the Trident sub can destroy 200 cities in the world in 40 minutes with multiple warheads. One sub. How many more weapons do we build for the profits of Lockheed and Boeing and Raytheon and Grumman before we make the rubble bounce? We have enough weaponry in TNT equivalents to make the rubble bounce. This is madness. It's technological and military insanity. And we should call it as such. But not when we don't study peace. Envision this world as you can aspire to make it. Make this world what you can make of this world.